Well, hey guys, welcome. Man, thank you so much for carving out some time tonight. Part two of our conversation, Navigating a Digital World. And really excited about the conversation tonight. Definitely want to be sensitive to your time. And so we're going to get rolling here in just a bit. Just want to remind you of a couple things. Zoom wise, if you'll just make sure that your mic is muted, and that is actually happening right now. So that's awesome. The other thing is utilizing the chat, man. We would love to hear from you. There's a few times tonight where there'll be questions that are asked specific to parenting a middle school or high school student, or maybe even a young child, 4th, 5th grade. And we would invite you to utilize that and take advantage of answering that question, or maybe you have questions about some of the content that we're going to be talking about tonight. And so make sure that you put those questions in the chat. If you will look on the bottom of your screen, there's a logo that says chat. You can click on that, pop in the question, and then we can get to that. So we have carved out some time tonight at the end to have some Q&A, which is a great opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have, whether it's about the content tonight, or if it is, from last time. We want to invite and welcome you to ask those questions. So let me do this, man. I'm going to pray for us, and then we're gonna jump in to part two of the conversation tonight. So let's pray together real quick. God, we love you and we thank you. Thank you for all of the parents that are a part of this call tonight, and the ones that will listen at a later time. God, we ask that as we have planned and prepared, that tonight would be a night where parents are, they are empowered to be who you've called them to be as guardians to their kids, where they would be equipped with next steps, God, of what they can do to make sure that technology in their home is more of a bridge than a wall. And God, where they would be encouraged tonight, encouraged that they're not in it alone, encouraged, God, that we're all figuring this thing out together, whether it's a parent in this call, or a student minister, or a person that's just ministering to middle or high school students this generation for such a time as this. So God, we ask you to meet us in this place tonight. We ask that your voice would be the loudest voice. We ask for you to give us wisdom and insight, and open our eyes to see what you see, especially when it comes to technology, and how it really can be a bridge to a deeper and more effective relationship with middle school and high school students, and as a family unit. So thank you for Brad and for his leadership, and just ask that you would also, God, just give him favor tonight. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, so our hope tonight is real simple. We really want tonight to be an opportunity for you, like I said in the prayer, right? For you to be encouraged as a parent, that we're not in this alone, but we're in this thing together, where you would be empowered to know that at the end of the day, you know this, Proverbs 22, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he grows old, he will not depart from it. I mean, this has been a commandment from the beginning. And so to encourage you that you have, like 1 Peter says, that you have been given everything you need as it pertains to life and godliness. And here's the thing, under that umbrella of life and godliness is parenting. Like, it is a part of what you have been given. So God has chosen you to parent your middle or high school student or child, and it is on purpose by his design. And so that's our goal tonight. I'm going to ask, some of you maybe weren't with us last time, so I do want to ask Brad if he would take a few moments and just introduce himself, tell a little bit about your family, Brad, and also just what you do there at Fuller, and then we'll get rolling.
Yeah, sure thing. It's great to be with you, all of you. I'm a dad, I'll start with that, of three kids, and my kids are currently 12, 15, and 18. So we are headed into a year where we're going to have three teenagers for 1 year before before our oldest hits 20. So that's been it just continues to be quite a journey and a fun journey. So I come to you as a parent. I also am a youth ministry leader in my church and have been doing youth ministry for more than a couple decades now. And then I also serve at the Fuller Youth Institute, and that's where I get to bring all of that together alongside research and work with an incredible research team. And so a lot of what I'll be sharing with you tonight comes out of that research, but also that ministry and parenting. And so I do not come as a parenting expert by any means, but as somebody who's on this road with you. And we are going to together tap into some of the resources that are out there, some of the research, and just hopefully some really, really practical ideas tonight. And we'll get to your questions.
That's awesome, Brad.
So,
I
yeah,
would go ahead
anything
and
else from
jump
you,
into it.
Evan, before I jump in? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, anything else from you before I jump in?
Nope. All yours.
Okay. All right. Great. Great. And thank you to folks who've texted in, chatted in the ages of your kids. And I want to encourage, others of you, if you want to share that, that would be really great. It just is helpful to see kind of who's in the room, what you're dealing with at home, what what you've got going on the home front, and um, just to kind of filter this through your own family, through your own context. So I'll jump into my slides, and we'll roll with it. As a reminder, you can readjust how you see slides and people, and you can pop out the chat so that you can see that. And we are going to roll right along. So I do have a picture of my kids in here. I had these in here last time, but my oldest is a college freshman this year. The middle one is a sophomore in high school and learning to drive. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And then I have a seventh grade son. So, um, those of you who are in the middle and high school range, a lot of you right there with you every single day. And I want to just remind us what we're doing here. So, last time, if you're with us, we talked about how technology, social media, digital media, this all can feel like these devices live in between us, that media can be a barrier or a wall, and instead we want to see it as something that can be a bridge, and that actually we put our relationships in the center. We put our relationships in the center, and that everything else serves that. And that's what you really want as a parent, right? You want to be connected with your family. And we're not going to get rid of the digital world. We're not going to do away with any of this media. And as we learn to live with it, we also don't just have to be resolved that we can't do anything about it. We don't have to feel helpless. So this is all about empowering us, and I'm hoping that you're going to walk away feeling a little more empowered tonight. Um, all right, I want to jump in to our first question for the evening, which is, how can I supervise what my kids are saying and sharing without making them feel like they're under surveillance? Okay, a lot of us, we know what surveillance is like, right? And we can kind of feel like if we're watching over their shoulder, maybe we feel a little more secure. Our kids might feel annoyed or resentful, but somewhere in between is this need to supervise without controlling, this need to kind of know what's going on and feel like we have a sense for what the boundaries are and what's happening, um, without while also giving our kids agency. A number of you have older teenagers, and that's so important that they feel and actually have agency. So we're gonna tackle that tonight, and I also want to put it in this context, in the context of discipleship. Okay, in the context of discipleship. So we're going to get there, and we're going to talk about our faith and how, as we mentor and guide our kids through the digital world, that we are discipling them and being disciples ourselves in this world. So as we get there, I want to encourage you to start, okay, by chatting in. What's your greatest fear when it comes to your kids and digital media? Your greatest fear when it comes to your kids and digital media. I know that we have a lot of fears. One of those is addiction, right? What is the line between addiction and um, normal, right? How do we know when we've crossed that line? A lot of times parents are scared of predatory behavior. We're afraid of the people the dark side of the internet, the people who might be coming after our kids, trying to lure our kids into those spaces. Exposure to all kinds of things, exposure they go looking for and exposure that goes looking for them. Sharing personal information. That's a big one, right? Privacy on the internet. Kids unwittingly sharing more than they should. Identity theft. Being lured in. Losing their innocence, right? Making decisions that they'll regret. All of these are very real. Very real. So I want you to hold those as we go. And I want to jump right into a few of them, okay? Related to these fears. We worry about what kids are sharing, in particular what teenagers are sharing. We worry about sexting, about sending and receiving sexually explicit messages. The stats on that are all over the place. It's hard to get a good sense for how many teenagers participate in that, but I will say as we go, it's becoming more and more normative in relationships to be asked to share, in particular for young women to be asked to share images of themselves. And as we know, as we've seen on the news, as you may have heard examples, these images end up getting shared a lot of the time. We know about revenge porn, and we worry about our kids getting caught up in that. We worry about all kinds of things that they might share that then get re-shared. One study found that up to 88% of self-generated images have been collected and put on in other places on the internet without the user's consent. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. And one of the things that we have to teach our kids from an early age and keep reinforcing for them is that everything that they put out there, whether that's in as simple as a text message to a photo to private information, any of that can be captured and can be reshared, right? Anything can be screenshotted. And that's a hard concept for teenagers. That's a hard concept for teenagers whose frontal lobes are developing. Their brains, I mean, in middle school, their brains are very literally getting rewired, and their ability to make decisions using what we would call wisdom or restraint, or the ability to think forward. Our 17, 18-year-olds, they're just starting to get there. And actually that full frontal cortex development doesn't happen until the early 20s. So we've got kids who have these powerful tools that are out there, and they have the world at their fingertips. A few more of these that we worry about. This is the phenomenon of vault apps. So these are some examples of these apps look like calculators. but they're actually vault apps where you could store explicit images or videos without being maybe your parents seeing, because they just think that it's a calculator. Some of these are continually getting created and they're getting taken down by stores who know what's going on, right? Apps like Snapchat. Now, Snapchat is interesting because it's very mainstream now. It's very much um, a prime time, we might say, platform. But what's interesting is the promise of Snapchat is that the posts go away. But the reality is that they don't go away. Until very recently, just like the last year or so, the age recommendation on Snapchat was 17 plus. And that's because it was actually created by frat boys, literally frat boys, who wanted to persuade young women to send images of themselves under the pretense that the images would go away. And these guys kept all those images. And the only reason they cleaned up their act was because they were required to, because they lost a lawsuit. There are all kinds of platforms like this out there. And, a platform like this where content goes away, it's not a bad platform in and of itself. But the question is, what's the intent? How's it used? How are young people using these platforms, and what are and aren't they sharing in these spaces? The FTC's put a lot more focus on child privacy, and here's just two examples of federal suits against some of the big players. TikTok, which is this huge player, and TikTok purchased Musical.ly, but they illegally collected names, emails, pictures, and locations of children younger than 13. YouTube got in a lot of trouble last year because of tens of millions of videos that could have been subject to predatory behavior. TikTok was fined almost $6 million for violating child privacy laws. This is all over the place. This is particularly thorny for YouTube. Children are among the most avid users of YouTube, which you might realize if you have kids, right? And videos geared towards kids who are underage, they're just all over, but they've really struggled to keep inappropriate content away from kids' videos. And in particular from teenagers who maybe go looking for inappropriate content. But there was a documentary created last year, or a video documenting how pedophiles actually used comments on videos of children to guide other predators. There's all kinds of stuff going on that, we can't just assume that our kids watching videos on YouTube are safe just because we have created age settings on those. There's anonymous apps, and these tend to be some of the worst places on the internet. Places like Ask FM or After School is another one. And being anonymous can really make people monsters. These are the sites that end up being places for a lot of bullying, a lot of the kinds of behavior that people might participate in when they don't have any kind of accountability. So what are some things we can do? That's a lot of scary stuff, right? It's a lot of scary stuff. So real practically, know the codes. Okay, you are the parent, and parents of minors have the right, and I think should, know all the device passwords and the app usernames and passwords for your kids. Obviously, this is a lot easier if you start young with this on the front end, but we can also do a reset and catch up to it. Why is that? This is for your kids' safety, okay? And you can communicate that very clearly to them, that this is for their safety, that you know and that you have a way in. In particular, if anything happens to them, if anything happens that they or their safety might be compromised in some way. But this is also a means of accountability. And for us to say, hey, I'm not going to log in. I'm not going to without your permission, get on any of your accounts. But because you are my child, because you are a minor, I need to be able to, if I need to, because I, as your parent, am accountable as well. This raises a really common question, and that is, how young is too young, right? How young is too young for that cell phone? How young is too young for Instagram or TikTok or whatever other platform your kid wants to get on? And here's the thing, as much as your 11-year-old seems mature enough to handle an Instagram account, or that 12-year-old really wants their own YouTube channel because they want to stream their gaming. The reality is that the rules that are set in place, the codes that are set in place to protect kids, say that 13 is the minimum age for using these platforms and applications. Okay? So 13. Now I'm very aware that fifth graders, that third graders, have their own smartphones with their own YouTube channels, all of this, right? But these rules are in place to protect our kids. And we can, as the parents, be, the bad guys. And we can say, hey, look, the authorities say, every user agreement says, and you may not read those user agreements, but they all say that you need to be 13 in order to use these platforms. And if you're not, actually the parent is liable for everything that is posted and every kind of interaction that happens on that platform. Giving our kids unfettered access at a really early age. I mean, it's a little bit like putting that 11 or 12-year-old behind the wheel of a Mercedes and sending them out to the freeway and say, have fun, right? Do whatever you want. Everyone's doing it. So it must be okay. These are really powerful devices. They're really powerful devices. And so if our kids are going to use them at a younger age, it puts even more responsibility on us to walk with them and to teach them and to mentor them through it. And we're gonna talk more about that tonight. So what's in between? There's all kinds of options for helping our kids wait while also beginning to engage in these spaces. And I talk to a lot of parents who say, I need my kid to have a phone because I've got to pick them up at practice, or I need to know where they are. And there's sort of these in-between devices. This is an image of what's called a light phone. It's actually for adults who want to take a break from technology, but it's viable for teenagers. You can call, you can text, there's GPS. Verizon put out the what they call the Gizmo watch. There are a number of different options. There's also a lot of parents opt for Wi-Fi only access. So for example, setting up an iCloud account for a kid to be able to iMessage their friends or be part of some of that social interaction, but that they only use it on a Wi-Fi device at home, as opposed to having a fully enabled mobile data device that goes everywhere with them. And I really encourage that kind of pacing and thinking about timing. For a lot of the things that we're worried about, though, when it comes to porn, when it comes to interaction with strangers, when it comes to a lot of these things that really concern us, research would say that the best prevention is to talk about it. Now, that sounds a little overly simplistic, but here's the thing. When it comes to porn usage specifically, this is really interesting. Studies show that just talking about pornography use with our teenage kids leads to reduced porn use in emerging adulthood. Okay, just talking about them, telling our kids, hey, you may stumble on this content, you may go looking for this content, but I want to talk to you about it. I want to talk to you about my values about it, and I want to talk to you about how it misrepresents what sex is, what sexuality is, and also how easy it is to get caught up in addiction. And those conversations, we can put other prevention in place, but that cannot substitute for conversations. Cannot substitute for conversations. You can also set up protocols. So the question is not if, but when our kids will be exposed to inappropriate content. The question is not if, but when they might be approached by someone who's a stranger online or friended by someone who they haven't met and they don't know. So teach them how to respond when those things happen. So that protocol might be, hey, if something scary or inappropriate happens, take a screenshot and get out of there and then show me. Anything that makes them uncomfortable or confused for younger kids. For adolescents, be straightforward with them. Say, hey, block that person who approaches you who you do not know. And if you get a message and it's really inappropriate, screenshot that and show me, because then I, as the parent, can report them to those platforms. And those protocols will help kids to know, hey, when that happens, that may not have been my fault, or they don't have to carry this shame of, oh, I did something wrong. I caused this. I was in the wrong place. Or I must have done something that brought that on. So then this gets us to the next layer of tracking content filters. These can be really, really useful tools, but let's see them as a backup. Okay, let's see them as a backup and not our only defense against these things that we're scared about. In other words, content filter cannot substitute for a conversation. Tracking our kids cannot substitute for a conversation. And many teenagers find their way around these filters anyway. They find their way around these limits. A lot of times I get requests, hey, do you think Circle is good? What is this or that app or service like? And I want to say that I don't make direct recommendations because these are changing all the time. And people's experiences with them change all the time. So I don't endorse any one particular service or filter, but I do encourage you. One tip is to talk to kids who have to parents who have kids in the same age range as yours and those who have kids a little bit older than yours, to ask them for recommendations for what's working in their family. And one note here is also to say, studies have found that teenagers resent when their parents are tracking them or they're seeing all of their content, and especially when they don't know. Okay, so if you put any of these things in place, please talk to your kids about it. Please let them know, hey, I'm going to use this service and it's going to show me the websites that you visit. Okay, let them know that up front. Don't do that behind their back. Don't do that behind their back, because that also shows that you trust them. And it shows that you believe that they can be mature and that they can make good decisions, but that this is going to be a safeguard that you're going to put in place as well. Let me say too, I know there are services that send every text message to parents. And I want us to think for a minute about what that would have been like for us. Okay. Now, it's one thing if your kid is just starting out and you want an easy way to monitor and to figure out what's going on, or if they're underage and you decide to go that route. But imagine if you were in high school and maybe you grew up like me in an age when you wrote notes on paper and passed them with your friends. Imagine if your parents had access to every single one of those notes that you wrote, or imagine if they listened in on every single phone call that you had with your friends, or maybe those of you who are who are younger parents, your AOL chats or whatever that was, those instant messenger. Um, Teenagers need space to be teenagers, to have privacy, and to communicate with each other. And I think that finding that balance through the teenage years is really, really important, particularly if our kids haven't given us any reason to not trust them in those spaces. So, that is one thing that you can chat in as we go that might be helpful to other parents. What services do you use that you recommend or don't recommend to other families? Because other families would probably like to know what you recommend for them. I also encourage you to use whatever's available to you that's built into the device, or just the basic services that you use. So, as an example, Google has Family Link. You can set up all kinds of things there that set, filters and limits and content. Again, it's only one tool. It's not an amazing tool, but it's something available to us. I also really recommend, if you use Apple devices, to use Apple Families. You can set up all kinds of things. Screen time is an incredible service. You can set up from your phone different limits and time limits, for the members of your family. And for yourself, and I encourage you to do that for yourself too, if you're going to do it for your kids. You can do things like turning down blue light at night to move towards bedtime, so that you can help those kids get to sleep, which is super, super important. All right. Another piece here is to check your own tech habits. And this, I think, is a hard one for us as parents. But if we're going to ask our kids to live and relate responsibly with technology, to live within certain limits and boundaries, I think it's a good question for us too. Do we sleep with our phone on? Is our phone the first thing that we look at in the morning and the last thing that we look at night, or some other device? Where are the times in our day and in our weeks when we are device free, or when we intentionally don't look at social media, when we take a break from some of these things that are part of our own rhythms? One tech writer wrote that he put on his lock screen for a season so that he would see it every time he picked up his phone. What for? Why now? What else? What for? Why am I picking this up? What am I going to use it for? Why right now? Why right now? Why am I doing this right now? And what else could I be doing? What else might need my attention? Or maybe even who else might need my attention? With your younger kids in particular, it is a good idea to create a ritual for checking texts, messages, other ways that they're interacting. If they're gamers, for looking together at their gaming chats, if they're doing social gaming. In early adolescence, I really do recommend this, and to do this together, to be clear that you're going to do it, to say, hey, once a week, let's sit down together and just kind of look through, tell me who these friends are that you're talking to. You're kind of just looking for red flags. You're looking for strangers, people that they can't identify right off the bat. Somebody who maybe joined their group chat or joined their, gaming group, but they look a little bit suspicious. You're looking for signs of bullying there, and what are the relationships like, including whether your kid might be bullying other people. But you're also helping teach them social appropriateness. Our kids don't know how to be appropriate in their messaging. They're learning on the fly, and they're learning without adults interacting in those spaces. And so as they get older, again, respecting their privacy is important, but they still need some forms of accountability, particularly if they've broken your boundaries or your trust. But for those younger kids, that can be a really great practice. And then back to you, back to us. To consider what we say and share online, most of us are guilty on some level of sharenting, posting photos, posting quips, sometimes posting the mistakes of our kids on social media. And that might seem cute, that might seem a way to protect our own sanity. We might really want to brag on our kids. All that is real, but it can weigh on them. One recent study found that one of the most common requests of kids ages 10 to 17 was that parents would stop posting photos without their permission. So we have a rule in our house that we ask first. Hey, I'd like to share this picture. Is that okay with you? I actually just did this a few days ago with my 15-year-old before posting a picture that had her in it, and I almost skipped it, but I was reminded that that's something that we've said to each other that we're going to do. So a few tips on this front. Ways we can take action. So ask your kids how they feel about what they share on social media and how others respond. This is a good way to get a sense for what is their evolving relationship, with social media look like? How does it feel when you get likes or comments on a post? How does it feel when you don't? When someone sends you a message or tags you or chats you or whatever that is, do you feel like you have to respond immediately or that you don't have to? Um, you know, Talk with your kids about what that's like. Some kids feel a lot of pressure and anxiety, others don't. Others really feel a lot of support and fun. And like this is the way that they're connecting with their friends. So every kid's going to experience that different. Second, point out what you love about what they share. Look for things that are positive. Look for things that are positive that you can appreciate. Maybe you see them encouraging a friend. Maybe they're artistic and you can really encourage that. And then ask your kids how they feel about what you share online, as well as how much you interact with them. You may follow them on Instagram, and I think that is very appropriate and something that kids should know, that their parents are going to follow them in that space, but they may not want you to interact with them in that space. They may not want you to comment, or they might want you to like every post. And this is something that's been surprising for me as a parent and different with different kids and in different seasons. And so this is one to renegotiate as well on the fly. And by the way, some of us might have to have hard conversations with our parents as well, because sometimes grandma is in those spaces. We all know teenagers who have more than one Instagram account. And, my 18-year-old said, Dad, literally my grandma is commenting on photos alongside my friends, right? Like it's no longer a safe space for teenagers when they have everyone watching them in this space. And that's something we need to talk about and respect. So I want to talk through this next section and then have some space for questions. And that's this: how and when can I gracefully take off the media training wheels and help my kid flourish? The goal here is mature adulthood, and that they can interact with media in mature ways. And I'll throw another goal out here, and that's this: how can I disciple my kids in a digital world? These questions are really closely related. And we could think of it like learning to ride a bike. We think about it like learning to drive a car, okay? And I am teaching my middle daughter right now how to drive. And she did not knock over all these cones. This is not a picture of her driver training, but she has had to do a lot of work. And in our state, you have to take an online course, you take a written test, you have to spend a certain number of hours with an instructor. You have to log 50 hours behind the wheel before you can take your driver's test. And then you've got a provisional license and you can't have other kids in the car with you. I mean, there's this process, right? And that's because we're putting them behind the wheel of a big machine. It's a huge responsibility. So in the same way, we can think about the digital world and these devices and platforms and these public spaces especially, kind of like teaching them to drive and helping them learn how to grow in responsibility. So here's those phases. First one, architect. You're the parent, they're the kids. And in this phase, you're really helping them build structures that last. This is in childhood and in middle school in particular. And this is where, as the architect too, you reserve the right to take the device away, to turn it off, to limit screen time, to say no to an app or a game. Even if you've crossed a line, you've given them too much freedom. Architect role is saying, hey, we're constructing something for the long haul here. And as your parent and as the one who, is paying the bills, by the way, in this mode, you also have the right to say, hey, if you want this device, here's a way you can earn some money to pay for that device because that's really expensive. Or you're going to get the hand-me-down device and I'm going to get the new device because I'm paying this bill. That's all architect, all right? Readiness is really important. And we can think about this by looking at how pediatricians think about toddlers, okay? So here's a pediatrics researcher who says, it's not so much screens are bad is the attitude we should have, but screens are not such a good idea right now. Akin to driving a car, not bad, but driving at age 3 to 5, not such a good idea. Tablets in particular may be so powerful and encompassing they may not belong in the hands of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Now, this goes against a lot of kind of common parenting practice right now. This is not about shaming and judging, okay? But let's take that up a notch. Consider their readiness for a smartphone that they carry around outside the house. Consider their readiness to get on social media. Consider when they're ready, are they ready for just because a kid turns 13 doesn't mean that they can handle that. It doesn't mean that they should get on 5 different social media platforms at once. Architect phase, readiness, that's helping them kind of step their way one step at a time, one step at a time. And then there's the mentor phase, and this is kind of the in-between where you're the guide, you're teaching skills, you're building character for adulthood. The goal is, to get to this interdependent place. But this mentor phase, this is the time for dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. Talk about media. Talk about its role in our lives. Talk about tech and faith. So we're thinking about discipleship, okay? What Bible or devotion apps do you use? Talk about that. Talk with your kids about, how you think about faith when you're on your devices. How does faith influence what or how you post? Talk about that with your kids. How do you create space for silence and screen-free rhythms? Are there particular times that you choose not to turn on your phone? Sometimes on Saturday mornings, I may not turn on my phone for the whole morning. But I need to say that out loud to my kids so that they know that that's part of my rhythm and that there's a reason for that. And that's what this mentoring phase is about. And then the companion phase, especially as they're heading into adulthood, we can be companions all along the way. And some of this is fun. We're using media together and building relationship. That could be playing video games with your kids. That's a companion kind of thing to do and getting in their space. But also companioning is saying, hey, we are in relationship together, and I'm going to see you as an adult and eventually as a peer in this space, and a co-traveler, and even as a teacher. So a few action points here, and we'll turn to questions. One, this is counterintuitive. Treat every kid differently. Okay, this is not typical parenting advice, but I want to tell you why I'm saying this. No 2 kids in the same family will need the same rules or boundaries or the same privileges around technology, because responsibility is looks differently, right? They're going to respond differently. One kid might really take care of devices and another may not. One kid might really follow your rules and limits, and another may not. But here's the other thing. I have 3 kids. They're all 3 years apart. The digital age between my oldest and youngest, their actual age is 6 years apart. But the digital age, it's like they grew up in a whole different world. And so I can't have the exact same conversations with my 12-year-old that I did when my 18-year-old was 12. Second, involve them in any kind of new plan. Don't walk away from these 2 workshops and say, all right, family, here's the new deal, right? We are going to change our habits. Here's all the new things that we're going to do. Talk to them, involve them, talk about it together, come up with some guidelines together that work and that work for your family together. And make sure that if there are new rules or boundaries or rituals that some of those apply to you too, that there's some cost for you too as a parent, so that you've got some skin in the game with your kids. Invest in your own social network. I don't mean get more friends on whatever platform you like. I mean, see other parents as allies. Too often, especially when it comes to hard topics like this, we can see other parents as competition or as threats, or we can feel ashamed that maybe we're not what we should be, in this particular area as a parent. We got to move past that because we need each other more than ever. So look to other parents as allies, as partners, as sources of information. I'm learning all the time from parents around me. I'm asking parents at church, hey, what do you do about this? Or is your kid on that? Or what do you think about this platform or this service? And then finally, don't forget to laugh. Laughter is how we get through a lot of things. But when it comes to technology, chances are real good you're not the expert in your house, okay? And so laugh at yourself when you goof it up. Laugh at yourself when you use the wrong emoji or you use really bad slang in a chat and your kid makes fun of you. Laugh along with them and say, you got to help me out with this. This is your world and I'm just trying to understand it. And laughing will help us get through it. I want to tell you about a couple things resource-wise, and then we're going to have some time here for questions and answers. Feel free to chat those in, or we'll jump back on with Stephen here in a minute. You can ask them. There are some free downloads. There are some resources at fulleryouthinstitute.org/digital world. If you want to check that out, including some resources like you can download a free PDF to help you when your kid wants a new app. Okay, I think you should have every right to approve an app or to reject it. And we have created a little resource where you can make them answer some questions, tell you what they know, make them do the homework about the privacy and all of that, and hand that to you when they want to request an app. I tell my kids, you cannot just send me app requests all through the day while I'm at work. I need 24 hours to be able to look at it and to consider before I approve an app. I also want to tell you about a book that we just actually announced today is out for pre-order. It's called 3 Big Questions That Change Every Teenager. It picks up on some of the deep questions that are behind what our kids are wrestling with in the digital space. And we talk about some of this tech-related stuff, but we also talk about what's deeper than that, these questions of identity, belonging, and purpose. And if you're interested in that, you can check out 3bigquestionsbook.com and you can pre-order that right now. We have a lot of extras that come along. You actually get 2 other books for free if you pre-order it in the next month or so. So I did want to mention that. And then as we transition to questions, I want you to chat in, if you're willing, what's an idea that you want to try or a conversation that you want to have sometime this week? One idea that you want to try or one conversation that you want to have this week. And with that, I will stop screen sharing and we'll see if we've got some questions and talk a little bit together.
Brad, man, thank you so much. Just like he said, everybody, if we would love to carve out some time tonight for a few just Q&A type of deals. So if you have a question, feel free to put that in the chat and we will get to those. I would say a couple of things that stick out from what you said, Brad, is just this opportunity or this, yeah, the opportunity to create safe places and safe spaces as parents. One way that we do that is to have those conversations ongoing. So it's not like let's talk about it one time, but it's a continuous conversation that happens over a period of time. And with that, I love what you said, man. I love the fact that you, hopefully parents in the call, you feel empowered to know all the passwords, to like know all the passwords, to know all the apps, to be able to prove all those kinds of things. I know for me, just being in student ministry, I think that in conversations I've had, I won't speak this over the parents in this call, but other parents that I've talked with, they just don't feel like they have those privileges or even those rights. And I think it's really good to hear you say that they absolutely do. So one question that has been put in the chat, Brad, is discuss times when we don't use our phones. That's actually an answer to your question. That is one idea that they're going to go after. So let's see if there's any other questions. I don't see any questions in the chat. Let me ask this question to you, Brad, if you don't mind. And again, guys, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. If you could do this for a second, I know that obviously this whole conversation last time and tonight, you're obviously speaking from several hats. One, Fuller Youth Institute, all the research that you've done. You're obviously speaking from being a parent yourself. So I would say if you could just wear the parent hat for a second, what's something that you have personally seen breakthrough because of steps that you personally have taken as it relates to the digital conversation that we're having?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What comes to mind for me is actually breakthrough in understanding, because I, as a parent, I see things that I don't know how to interpret sometimes. And I think asking those questions, hey, help me understand what this is about, or when you say this, or when you post this, or, when your friend posts this, what does that mean? Help me understand what's going on there. Because I don't think I understand. And it puts my kids in a place of empowerment in that they can explain. Now sometimes they're annoyed by that question. Sometimes that makes them mad, like, you just don't get it. And I try to, say, no, I don't get it. I realize that I don't get it, and I want to understand, and I don't want to make assumptions. So, help me understand. And I have genuinely learned a lot from my kids from that. And I also say, I also, this isn't breakthrough as much, but I think building trust and respect by not asking about every single thing. And this is a conversation my wife and I have had too. We may see a lot of what's out there, but it's not necessarily good to talk about every single thing that we see, or to ask about every single thing, right? That I think our kids do feel overly sometimes like they're being monitored when we ask about something because we saw it on Instagram, or we bring up something because we saw it on Instagram. And I think there are times when it's been helpful in our relationship to actually not talk about all of it for a while, and let there be some separation in that space. So I think, navigating that has been a real learning journey for us, for sure. One other breakthrough that comes to mind is one of my kids has struggled with anxiety and walking in that process with that kid who on their own decided to get off of TikTok because they felt like it was just actually increasing their anxiety, and who decided to delete Snapchat and walking through that process, like it was so powerful for that teenager to decide on their own, hey, I think that this is actually unhealthy for me right now, and to make that decision, but that was something that um, yeah, it just felt really big for me, to see that sometimes teenagers do really know what's good for them and what's not, and they can make really mature decisions sometimes. And when we put that in their hands and ask them, how's this going for you? What's this like? What's this doing for you right now? We said this the first time, social media can be a huge source of social support for kids. And it can also be a source of anxiety. And so, navigating that, we really need to talk with our kids about that to understand it. Yeah.
Man, that's great insight. Thanks for answering that. Here's a question that came in the chat. I'll read it to you. How can I convince my teenagers that they are on the phone too much? How do I help them realize that too much phone time might inhibit them achieving their dreams?
Yeah, good luck, right? This one is hard. And I think that this too is maybe where we start with ourselves. I think sometimes self-disclosing and being able to say, hey, I've realized in my own life, maybe it's not actually the phone for you, maybe it's something else. But a lot of us can use examples of being on the phone too much or being on our computer too much, spending too much time in some of these places, or maybe it's something else in your life that can consume you or distract you. And say, part of growing up is learning how to balance these parts of our lives. And what I've had to learn is, XYZ. Like I've had to discipline myself. I've had to put these limits on myself or create these boundaries or systems in my life to stay healthy and to stay focused on the things that I think really matter and that I really value. And I wonder what that is for you. I wonder how you feel like the time that you spend on your phone is helping you achieve those things you really want to achieve or live out the values that you really want to live out. Um, Especially with older teenagers, that kind of dialogue is, I think really important, and that sort of self-disclosure. With younger with younger teenagers, I think we can be more straightforward. I am a research geek, and so I always leverage research with my kids, and I say, hey, research tells us that our brains need this downtime. And so, we talked about this last time, drawing that boundary around bedtime is really important. And there's tons of data behind it, but to say, hey, look, the researchers tell us that we need that hour or 45 minutes before we go to sleep for to turn that light off, to not be staring at that screen because it disrupts our sleep. And our sleep, you really need your sleep to be a good human, to be the human that you want to be, and to really be able to like step into your next day. And so let's put these rhythms in place that can help us be the kind of humans that we want to be. That's not super easy for a teenager, be ready to get shut down. That might be the kind of thing we need to like repeat over and over. But again, we gotta live it for ourselves. So like for me, it's been, I need to find a book that I can read so that I'm actually modeling for my kids, like that period of time before I go to bed, I'm sitting on the couch and reading a book, because it's something that's off a device, because I spend all day looking at a screen. And so that's something that I actually have to discipline myself to do because I believe in it, but because I believe my kids need to see it modeled.
It's great. There's a pretty lengthy question in the chat, Brad, that I'll just let you read, and then kind of respond from your thoughts.
Yeah, complicated, right? I want to say with cyberbullying, I think when I do think it's really important to get caring adults involved, and you know, often to get authorities involved when cyberbullying is happening. This is where, you know, unless the school leadership has proven to not handle these things well, school leadership often need to know. Sometimes the police need to know, depending on the extent of cyberbullying, honestly. Um, but then there's the side that's around, kids believe the things that are said about them that I think is being kind of shared here, that there's like the justice side and the how do we, what is actually going to happen here. Um, and then there's the pulling myself out of, um, this is not actually who you are, and I think that takes a community. It takes parents and leaders. I think it takes pulling some other students in to be to help reinforce, that message to those kids, like, hey, this is who you really are. And we really love you, and this is who God says you are. And these messages do not define you. um, but that can take a lot of untangling, and sometimes that needs professional, help as well. um, that might be, it might be a cluster of resources there. Yeah, yeah, that's big.
That's good, Brad. Thanks for answering those. There's one more, and I want to be sensitive to everybody's time. I know if you need to head out, no problem. But you did say something that I thought was really interesting. A lot of it, all of it. But one thing in particular that I keep thinking about, we use this term in our student ministry context, small group leaders, parents, this idea of guarded transparency. And so it's this idea that, we would never coach or encourage anybody to lie to a student, but we would encourage to take into account the maturity level, take into account how developed they are, and to be honest, but also to be guarded in the information or in the things that are being talked about or even revealed, right? And I think you said something as it relates to kind of the three roles of architect, companion, mentor. But you said a comment. I'd love for you to dig into it just for a few minutes here, if you can. You don't have the same conversations with, that you had with your kid as a 12-year-old as they're an 18-year-old, and vice versa, right? Would you mind just to dig into that a little bit, from that perspective of being guarded but honest, and kind of maybe in different seasons of their life, how you've navigated what you would reveal and what you would say? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And this is tricky in those spaces where, these conversations come up. So, the way that we talk about something at the dinner table across that age divide, might be different than what we say in a one-on-one conversation. There are, my 18-year-old for the last couple of years has been able to handle particular, more nuanced conversations, conversations around justice, conversations around race, conversations around the way, you present yourself in social media spaces, for example. Political conversations around politics. That's a very different conversation with that 18-year-old than it is with a 12-year-old who's thinking a lot more concretely still, who needs a little more of a straightforward answer. who's just starting to like get into the abstract thinking, but it's still pretty concrete, still pretty black and white, you know? And and actually, you know, the difference too between um, not only the type of answer that we give, but the type of questions that we're asking. And I think that, you know, um, I think that's really important. You know, we're not disclosing all the same things to that middle schooler that we are to that high schooler, but we're also not expecting the same things from them. You know, we're not expecting that like nuanced, deep, abstract understanding from a seventh grade boy. Um, because that's just not there, that's just not developmentally where he is, you know?
Not reality. That's right.
And it doesn't mean that he can't, you know, think about big questions, or take in, you know, something that's real. It's not that we've got to play games with them all the time. It's just that, um, you know, developmentally they're in a very different space, and so we're entering that and also expecting different things from it. But I also want to say I think we make a mistake when we're still treating that 18-year-old like we treated the 12-year-old. And I have, you know, I do hear parents sometimes giving responses to their 16, 17, 18-year-olds that sound a whole lot like the way you would talk with a younger kid. And I think sometimes we can kind of stunt the relationship by not being willing to go to those honestly like riskier and scarier places that feel more out of control to us in the
Yeah.
conversations with our older kids. But they're ready for that. They need that, and that's what helps kind of turn the corner in that relationship
Mm.
in those older teen years. Yeah.
That's great, man. Thank you so much for your insight tonight, for teaching us, helping us to understand more um, how to make. I love what you said. How to make technology not the wall, but a bridge to greater relationships. So, parents, for those of you that are in the call, man, thank you again for being a part of tonight. Obviously, man, we know that everyone is busy, and so we are very grateful that you would carve out some time to be a part of the conversation. Um, and we hope, like we prayed earlier, that you have felt empowered tonight as a parent, that you have felt encouraged, and that you feel equipped to try some things that maybe you haven't been doing, to have some different conversations that maybe you just needed some empowerment to have. And just really excited for what that's going to look like and how God's going to move in each of your families. Let me do this, man. Let me pray for us tonight. Actually, Brad, would you mind? Would you mind, kind of like last time, to close us in prayer, praying for these parents and families, and then we'll be done.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Let's pray. God, we're here in this conversation tonight because we love our kids. We love them so much. And God, we're so grateful that you've given us the privilege of stewarding their lives, um, of caring for them as parents, as grandparents, uh, as aunts and uncles, as those who are raising whoever you've given us to raise, God. Um, I pray you'd give us courage. I pray for these friends, God, that you'd give them insight and strength. Lord, help us to know, as we started out saying, God, to know that you've given us all we need, that you have equipped us, that you've given us your spirit, that you've given us strength to be the parents that our kids need. And I pray we would feel that that empowering and that confidence. And also, God, that we would trust that you hold us when things don't go well, and that you're with us when things feel frustrating and broken and disappointing, and that you love us through it. God, thank you for this time together. And I pray that we'd all be able to walk away and take one next faithful step. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. Have a great night. Grateful for you. And we'll see you next time.